Thank you for joining the February 2024 TAM customer webinar. This webinar is organized by the TAM organization to provide you, our customers, the opportunity to hear great content and interact directly with great speakers that are delivering it. Our goal is to make sure you're getting the full benefit from your software. So please make use of the Q&A feature to ask any questions. And if your question doesn't get addressed today, be sure and reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up. Before we get into the content, just a couple of basic announcements. Our next TAM webinar will be on March 14th, and in this upcoming session, we'll explore architectures, cloud operating models, and use cases for VMware Cloud Foundation, and how it uses a consistent infrastructure layer with automation and orchestration to deploy production-grade full-stack infrastructure. As I mentioned earlier, we want you to benefit from these sessions by interacting with the speaker. So if you have any questions during today's webinar, please use the Q&A feature and we'll address them during the webinar. At the end of today's session, you'll be prompted to fill out a simple survey related to the value you received from this session and any topic suggestions for future sessions. We'd greatly appreciate you completing that. It would help us organize sessions for the future and line up topics for you. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded and your TAM can make the recording link available to you. And after a few months, the recording will be publicly available on the VMware TAM Services YouTube channel. That brings us to today's topic and speaker. Aria Operations is a powerful data analytics engine that helps enable IT operations management across multiple clouds. And part of that is generating alerts and making notifications from those alerts. Brock Peterson is a VCF specialist focusing on the Aria suite, including Aria Automation, Orchestrator, Ops for Logs, and of course, what we'll be discussing today, Aria Operations. You can find Brock on his website at brockpeterson.com, where you can find not only this topic, but tons of other topics and helpful content across the Aria suite. So with that, Brock, I'll hand it over to you to get us started.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Can you see me okay and hear me okay and see the screen and whatnot?
Yep, looks great.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So, hey, everybody, I am Brock Peterson. I'm going to go on video for kind of the introduction here. Talk a little bit about operations alerts and notifications and all of that good stuff. I see we have like 300 and some attendees, which is just awesome. A bunch of names that I see in there that I know, old customers, new customers, customers that I've done tons of POCs and trials and use cases and whatnot with. So thanks for joining today. And Chris, thanks for the opportunity. So here's kind of an intro, and I'll talk a little bit about where we've been in the past, where we are today, and kind of where we're going and focusing on the Aria suite. But a little bit about me first. I am what we're calling the VMware Cloud Foundation Specialist SE. So they used to know us as vRealize SEs or Aria SEs or CMBU SEs. We're basically SEs that cover the Aria suite at this point. And then, of course, there's a little bit of background there, some content around my new email address, as well as my blog and my Twitter handle. And I highlight those for a couple of reasons, not just to drive traffic, but if you've been to my blog, you'll notice that I blog primarily about customer use cases, right? There's very little marketing out there. They're all customer use cases around things like alerts and notifications, around capacity planning and right sizing. I very much focus on operations and logs, whereas automation, salt stack config, and some of the others are kind of my minors. So with that, I think I am going to go off video and kind of get into the broader suite of things here. So what are we talking about today, and where does it fit within what we're calling VMware Cloud Foundation? So over the last couple of months, lots of changes for VMware by Broadcom. The most recent change is that we have drastically simplified the SKUs that we're offering, right? So we've gone to VMware Cloud Foundation and VMware vSphere Foundation. And I thought it would benefit us to kind of take a step back and talk about a little bit about where Aria Suite and specifically Aria Operations fits within VMware Cloud Foundation, right? So this is kind of the money shot for VMware Cloud Foundation. It lists everything that's in it, as well as some of the highlights, right? So if you've been working with VCF, it's been out for quite some time. You may know it from back in the 4.x days. I think we're at 5.1 most recently. But this is what's in the latest package or the latest bundle of VMware Cloud Foundation. So vSphere Enterprise Plus, including TKG and vCenter, vSAN, NSX HCX, Aria Operations for Networks, all of that is enterprise. Aria Suite Enterprise, and then of course you deploy it all with SDDC Manager. And there's a dozen or so different advanced add-ons down below, things like DFW, GFW, and whatnot. And you can take a screenshot if you'd like. But what I'm going to focus on is the Aria Suite Enterprise layer of this stack, right? So back in the day, we would talk about years ago the vRealize Suite. Today, we're talking about the Aria Suite. What's in the Aria Suite Enterprise versus Advanced or Standard or whatnot? So let's double click on that to have a look. So what do we have? We have logs, we have operations, we have automation, all lifecycled by Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. We'll work our way through each of these. So Aria Operations Enterprise is listed at the top here. So I list it there for a reason. One is Aria Operations is very much on the VMware marquee, right? I think of it just kind of right below vSphere or ESXi. Back in the day, I think we even had a SKU for just vSphere and Aria Operations called vSOM. So what can it do? Why are we doing it? Generally, it's our observability monitoring and troubleshooting platform, right? Using data analytics, AI, ML, doing things like capacity management, right sizing, reclamation, alerting, costing, pricing, showback, and chargeback, all sorts of use cases that Aria Operations has developed over the years. And in lieu of the observability and monitoring, of course, we generate alerts, right? But what do we do with those alerts? Do we take action on them? Do we notify different DevOps teams or support teams of them? And that's really where we're going to double click today, is kind of in the alerting and notification mechanisms. Of course, alerts can just sit within operations, but it's pretty rare that you'll have anyone just kind of sitting there watching the UI. So we need to notify people, and that's how we do notifications. And we will certainly double click on that. Also have some compliance and sustainability functions, as well as application monitoring and native public cloud capabilities. So that last bullet is really where the enterprise comes into play. So how does that layer in with operations for logs? As you know, operations for logs, or what was formerly vRealize Log Insight, has just one edition, right? No advanced or enterprise. And it will capture events, alarms, IDs, syslog out of the box from vCenter, ESXi, VMs, and any syslog source that you might have, right? So maybe you're running some compute management plane or running some agents that can generate syslog. We can consume those into Aria Operations for logs and take action on them, or use them for observability and troubleshooting, right? Logs is very much kind of a real-time observability and troubleshooting tool, whether you're looking for all paths down or disks full, maybe cert expiries, SSHD running, local root logons, what have you. And operations for logs can also do alerting and notifications. And before the call started here, Brian and I were actually talking about how we can do some of the notifications, including webhooks, from logs directly, but we can also do them from operations. And more importantly, we can forward all of the logs or alerts that we generate within Aria Operations for logs to Aria Operations. And I'll show you that here in a little bit. Of course, we also have log management, forwarding, filtering, partitions. Aria Operations for logs is a very rich log aggregator. I think it doesn't get as much attention as it should, right? There's an integrated load balancer. We can set up virtual IPs such that you can send any syslog type log to logs, point it at a virtual IP, and that integrated load balancer will then tag that log at its source. And we can use those tags for indexing, for partitions, for search capabilities down the road. So that's kind of logs and how it integrates with operations. And then, of course, Aria Automation Enterprise is our enterprise capabilities around DevOps, infrastructure as code, which we use YAML for. So assembler is where you'll do all of that work. Service broker is really the service catalog that we can wrap with governance, right? So approval policies, leasing concerns, things like that. Pipelines orchestrator, and we also have native public cloud capabilities there as well. So the ability to deploy into native public cloud. So we're going to focus on alerts and notifications, but I thought we would step back a little bit and kind of talk about the operations architecture itself, the operations clusters, right? So if you're on the call, you are likely already running operations, be it a 1-node cluster or a 16-node cluster or anything in between, right? So whenever you spin up a POC or a trial, you've likely spun up maybe a medium or a large single node cluster, connect it to your vCenter or vCenters, start pulling in data, and you're off and running. But as you grow, you're consuming more objects, you're consuming more metrics, you just have more data, right? So you will generally expand your operations clusters by adding data nodes. We support up to 16 data nodes. You generally will want them all the same size. We also support CA, or continuous availability, via a witness node at a third physical location, or high availability, or HA, with a replica node. Again, you build a data node, you promote it to a replica node and enable HA. If you recall, we used to also have what we called remote collectors, which existed at robo sites or what have you. In 8.10, I think, we converted those to kind of detached cloud proxies. And in an effort to kind of simplify what was running in the cluster, to allow for, quicker cluster patches, boots, et cetera. That's kind of the cluster itself. And then up top, I talk a little bit about the competencies, right? So of course, there's a UI and an admin UI, as well as a suite API, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But once we have our operations cluster up and running, if you've deployed it standalone or you've deployed it via Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager, it doesn't matter. You start collecting data, right? You collect data via what we call adapter instances, right? That connect to vCenters, that connect to vSAN, your NSX managers, your NSX advanced load balancers. Start bringing in all of that data, enrich the relationships, the metrics, the properties that we're consuming, and then start alerting on things, start creating dashboards, views, and reports, which are all of kind of the pretty pictures within operations that allow you to visualize the data, right? I know we're going to focus on alerts and notifications today, but dashboards, views, and reports really get most of the attention in operations because they're the pretty pictures, right? They allow you to surface the data you want to the people that want to see it, right? There's very rich dashboard sharing capabilities. Views, for me, are the most powerful construct within operations, in that you can perform translations, you can do unit changes. There's all sorts of things you can do in views that allow you to maybe have an alternative to something like supermetrics or whatnot. As I work our way across the bottom here in terms of data sources, we also have capabilities for native public cloud, as well as third-party sources, right? So the third-party sources would be things like compute platforms, storage platforms, whatnot. So I'm thinking here the old VRTVS or the old Blue Medora stuff, right? So we can start bringing in compute, network, storage, firewall, applications, et cetera, and enrich that vSphere data, as well as provide resource mapping. So now I can maybe troubleshoot beyond the vSphere edge, say from a data store to the underlying volume, or the actual physical storage supporting that data store. So these are really all of the competencies, including right-sizing reclamation, which is a powerful use case in operations. But alerts and notifications is where we're going to focus our time today. So let's get into that a little bit. So what really is an alert within operations? If you've been in there and you've created any alerts on your own, you know that an alert is really just sort of a wrapper, right, around one of two constructs, what we call a condition or a symptom. So a condition is sort of the triggering mechanism, right? A condition might be something like CPU beyond 95%, for example, or any sort of metric beyond a static or a dynamic threshold. And those are locally defined. Conditions came out, I don't know, mid eights, maybe 8.4, something like that. It's just a little bit easier way to actually create a trigger. Whereas a symptom, it's actually a globally defined construct in and of itself. So a symptom is very much like a condition, but it can be used in multiple alerts. So say, for example, you want a symptom, let's go back to the CPU example, CPU beyond 95%, you can create a symptom that has several different operators within it, different thresholds, et cetera. And those are actually the triggering mechanisms for the alert. The alert is really just a wrapper in and of itself. When we go into the demo here, I'll show you how we create those. But once we have the alerts, of course, if you're in your UI and following along, you can just go over to troubleshoot on the left-hand side, go to alerts, and you'll see all of your alerts. They'll just sit there, right? Nobody's going to be notified. So unless there's someone watching that UI, we have to make some notifications. So how do we do that? We do it a couple different ways. Generally via notifications and what we call outbound plugins. But there are 6 or 7 different notification types available here, right? So REST, webhook, email, Slack, ServiceNow, and SNMP. So REST is just that. And if you go into your outbound plugins, you'll notice that the REST notification does have a little deprecated sign next to it. I've actually looked at the next release. It's not deprecated in 8.16 either. So I expect REST to stick around for a little bit. So if you are using REST notifications, rest easy for now, although webhooks are getting a lot more attention, right? So webhooks allow us to make simple notifications and use customized payloads to things like Google Chat or Microsoft Teams or Slack or PagerDuty or some kind of notification tool like that. And I'll go through a demo on how to do it, how to adjust those default payload templates. This is probably the most popular right now in that it's real time. Folks tend to be using IM quite a bit more these days than even email. Of course, we support email, just SMTP, of course. We also have a built-in Slack plugin as well as one for ServiceNow. So the Slack plugin itself is out of the box and it's just really using a webhook over to Slack. Whereas the ServiceNow notification plugin will ultimately open incidents in ServiceNow, and we're doing that via REST and HTTP. But there's an additional way we can kind of enhance that. I'm not going to go into it in this session, but you can use the VRTVS management pack or the old VRTVS management pack for ServiceNow to create 2 other constructs in ServiceNow, the event or the alert. And a teammate of mine, Dale Haskinger, is actually having a talk on that tomorrow if you wish to join. So I can share out that link if you just ping me. But finally, the last and probably least used at this point would be the SNMP traps. So SNMP traps we can send out to event management systems like MoogSoft or IBM Tivoli Netcool Omnibus. Whatever event management system you might be using, we can send traps to it, right? Of course, we can just export those MIBs. You can import them into your event management system so you can properly decipher those traps. But those are kind of the big 6. And we can create alerts and we can generate notifications on any metric, any property, any event, all of the data that's coming into operations, right? Because at its core, operations is really just a data analytics engine. And we use all of these constructs to make things known or publish them or notify people or do things like right sizing. So, be it kind of VMware cloud, private cloud, VMs, data stores, clusters, et cetera, or third-party sources, we can make alerts as well as notifications on them. In fact, I see an old customer on the call who, we were trying to inject events into operations, right? And we did that via API, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. But the point is, anything that we can put into operations, we can make an alert and a notification on. So we'll talk a little bit more here about kind of the construct that is alerts, symptoms, recommendations, and actions, because they're really paired, right? So we'll take a step back. Alerts are the wrappers, symptoms and conditions are the triggering mechanism, right? So like I said, CPO beyond a certain threshold, be it a static threshold or a dynamic threshold, that's what actually triggers the alert. But tied to those, if you're in alerts and creating them, or if you created them in the past, you'll know that there's recommendations and actions, right? So back to our CPU example. If you're running out of CPU, maybe you want to recommend to add more. Maybe you want to recommend to SSH into the box and see who's consuming it. But you can also take actions. And by actions, I mean vCenter actions. I mean VRO workflows or orchestrator workflows. Whatever actions are available to us, we can make those actions available from the recommendation, which is tied to the alert, symptom, and condition. And we can make them automatically run, or you can just assign them as manual and give the user a button within the alert such that if you're running out of CPU, either add more, reboot the VM, what have you. In fact, one of the customers is on the call here. I was working with him recently on a small lab. They were doing some development in a couple different VMs there. They just wanted to reboot the VMs whenever they had 100%, right? It's just the sandbox. They're just playing around. So we wrote an alert symptom recommendation action combination such that anytime CPU was at 100% for 15 minutes or so, we would just boot it. And this would save them a bunch of time. Developers wouldn't have to come to them. It was just a lab that all they were doing is some development work that they just needed to boot VMs on. And we did it. It worked for them for about a week. And then we took it out of play. So recommendations and actions don't get as much attention as alerts and symptoms, but they're very, very powerful. So, explore those when you're creating alerts. So if you're following along in your UI, jump over to configure and alerts, and this is kind of how you build them, right? So there are, various names, description, base object types, as well as advanced settings. And I like to give them very descriptive names, right? So CPU or memory or disk or network or IO, whatever you're looking at, give it a name and a description that fits, right? Because you might use those globally, you might use them within certain environments. These sort of act as tags later on, and I'll show you what I mean by that in the demo. The base object type is just that. So in this case, I've chose a VM. And then in advanced settings, you also have the ability to set impact, criticality, type, subtype, and a wait cycle. So impact is, if you recall back in the day of badges, impact is really kind of the health, risk, and efficiency badge. So, if you assign alert to the health badge, it'll affect the health of that object. If you assign an alert to the risk badge, it'll affect the risk of that object. I will almost exclusively use health because I like my alerts to affect the health of objects, because I use that as badges across views, dashboards, and the like, but they're all available. Of course, criticality can either be locally defined or based on a symptom. And what I mean by that is in your dropdown, you'll see that you can define your severity or criticality in your symptom, or you can define it locally in your alert. And I'll show you that here in a little bit. I don't use alert type and subtype quite as much, but this allows you to put sort of a tag on your alerts, right? Is it application-based? Is it hardware-based? Is it compute-based? What have you? And then the wait cycle and cancel cycle are very important. These allow you to sort of turn the dial on how sensitive your alert is, right? So if you want to notify someone as soon or generate an alert as soon as you go to 95.1% on CPU, you can. But maybe you want to take a couple cycles at that, right? Maybe you want it to be 95.1 now. Maybe you want it to be 95.1 or 2 or whatever, 2 minutes from now, 3 minutes from now, 4 minutes from now. The point is that you can turn that dial to be very, very sensitive, to alert as soon as you see it, or to maybe ask for 2 or 3 or 4 cycles at which a certain condition is being met. So play with the wait cycles and cancel cycles. They can be really powerful. So what do the symptoms and conditions look like? So remember, the conditions are kind of locally defined, and they were introduced a few releases ago, whereas the symptom is really a construct in and of itself that can be used globally. So the first example here we're looking at is a condition. And of course, you can have any all or and or operators on them. So I've written this condition to have, 4 subconditions. So if CPU is over 90%, generate an info alert. If it's greater than 95, a warning, 97 an immediate, 99 a critical. So there are effectively 4 different conditions that will trigger this alert, and they're based on threshold, right? So it's important to use those thresholds, to use the kind of the Boolean operators, as well as the severity to get what you need. But you can also use symptoms, right? So symptoms, and I have a screenshot here kind of highlighting the ability to use static thresholds as well as the ability to use dynamic thresholds, right? So, and folks will miss this from time to time because it's in kind of the top right of the symptom creation there. But here again, I've just gone back to my CPU example, but CPU over a certain threshold generate an alert. Of course, we have advanced settings here for wait cycle and cancel cycles. You can add additional symptoms, much like you would additional conditions to symptoms. But keep in mind that you have the ability to use static and dynamic. Dynamic can be very powerful in that we can alert when things are just abnormal, right? So if dynamic thresholds are being run against metrics, which we can enable or disable in policies, by the way, we can alert when things are abnormally high or abnormally low. So keep that in mind when you're creating them. Also, symptoms can, of course, be created on metrics, which is what we've largely been talking about here, but they can also be created on properties and message events, right? So say events coming in from vCenter or some third-party management plane via a TVS management pack, something like that. And then, of course, you assign a recommendation. We have thousands of recommendations out of the box, or you can create your own, right? So oftentimes I will create my own. Here I've said set CPU count for VM, and I've tied an action to it that actually either adds VC CPU or just reboots the box. So if you remember back to my example previously, I created an alert symptom combination. Then I generated a recommendation that had an action of reboot guest OS because it was just a lab, just a development environment. So now anytime that customer actually went beyond a certain threshold, their VMs were booted, no work to be done. And then finally, and this is an important piece. If you remember back in the day, you would have to create an alert symptom combination, and then you have to go over to your policies and activate it. They made that, of course, part of the wizard here a few releases back. So policies is where you enable and disable any of your alerts. So of course, you can see my default policy here and all of the others that I'm using for various reasons. And this is where you actually activate your alert, right? So maybe you want an alert in a certain policy against a certain group, only on certain VMs, what have you. And if you recall, policies run in order and the default is your catch-all, right? So policies can be a little confusing that way. So they'll run in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera. And then the vSphere solution default policy is the very last policy that acts as your catch-all. So if a VM or an object or what have you works its way through all of its policies and isn't caught, it will be caught by the default policy as the catch-all. This is why it's really important to keep your default policy in place. And any custom policies that you create, inherit from and make it a child or clone, if you will. They just don't use that terminology there. So that's what I've done here. And that's how you kind of enable those alerts. So if you're following along and you're in your UI, just jump over to alerts under troubleshoot, and you can see all of the active alerts. There are filtering capabilities top right. There are actions that you can take against them, right? So you can cancel, you can suspend, you can take ownership, lots of different things that you can do, including you can go to the alert and symptom details themselves, as well as take an action. So you see in the middle of the screen there where it says set CPU count in memory 4. That's the action that we had tied to a recommendation previously. So explore these. There's a ton that we can do here, including just canceling and deleting if you wish. So take a step back a little bit and jump kind of over into notifications. I think that might be a decent spot to pause, Andy. Any questions or comments? I'm not watching the Q&A, so hopefully Dale is, but any questions or comments that we might want to bring up?
Yeah. So there are a few in here, and Dale is answering them. Um,
Okay, great.
there's a pretty interesting one here though, and you
Yeah.
may have covered it when you were talking about wait cycles, but I want to make sure.
Hmm.
So there's a question here about delaying the sending of notifications, meaning like the alert. Let me just read it here. It says, meaning the alert
Sure.
will still trigger normally, but only
Hmm.
when it's active for more than a certain amount of time. So you'll send a
Yeah.
notification only, for example, when a host is disconnected for more than
Hmm.
however many minutes.
Yeah. Yep. So that's where we would use the wait and cancel cycle, right? So say a host is disconnected and we discover that right now. Well, we wait for 5 minutes, check again, it's still disconnected. We wait for 5 minutes, it's still disconnected, then we alert. So I would use the wait and cancel cycle in that case. Sometimes people want to know right away, sometimes they don't, right? And we can also put different notifications on those. So maybe on the first alert, we want to know, but it just goes to email or something. Maybe on the second alert, it goes to email and maybe Slack or something via webhooks. And then on the third, a page or text or SM is sent out, something like that. So I would use wait and cancel cycle in that case. Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Any others?
There are a few more here. But I think some of them they're answered. I think it's important
Okay.
just to call it out here on audio though, for recording and reference,
Yeah.
because wait cycles and cancel times, the intervals, I think that there's different times there. But just to confirm, the cycle is 5 minutes.
Yeah. So out of the box, operations, your adapter instances will be collecting data every 5 minutes. You can turn that down to 60 seconds if you want. That's as low as we can go today, or you can turn it up as high as you want. So let's just use the vCenter adapter, for example. So the vCenter adapter, every 5 minutes, go over to the vCenter APIs, collect all the data it can, and bring it back. And then we will make alerts and notifications based on that data. 5 minutes later, it'll hit those APIs again, bring all that data back, regenerate. So you can turn those alerts down, or that collection interval down to 60 seconds if you want, or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever. Or you can turn it all the way up. It really is kind of dealer's choice here, right? So if you want to be really chatty, turn it down, start making those alerts right away. If you want to be a bit more lenient, maybe turn it up and alert after 2 or 3 cycles. So it's dealer's choice, but great question. Thank you, Chris.
Yep. Thanks for confirming that here.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have some more content. We can kind of
Yeah,
get
I
to
do.
questions as we move along. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, great. So let's talk a little bit about notifications, right? So we talked about alerts, the conditions, the symptoms, the triggers, all of that good stuff. So let's talk about notifications and kind of what they look like. So if you're following along, you can jump over to configure and alerts in the left-hand side, and then jump into outbound plugins, and you'll see all of the outbound plugins. And these are all 7 or 8 of them. And these have changed over time, right? So let's walk through them. The log file outbound plugin. This works, for example, say you want to write all of your alerts to a local log file for whatever reason. Maybe you have a script running against that log file. Maybe you want to keep all of those alerts for audit purposes. Whatever that might be, you can write them to a local log file, easily done with the log file outbound plugin. REST is just that, right? And you can send out REST payloads to any endpoint that's available. Network shares. These are just NFS shares, very analogous to the local log file, just NFS, right? So maybe you have scripts running, maybe you need them for audit purposes, write them to an NFS share, good to go. Email, SMTP, right? This is probably the first notification that every single customer sets up in their lab. Send me an email when something's going on. And if you have set those up, you'll notice that the payloads are, less than great out of the box. The beauty is that we can customize those, and I'll show you how to do that here in a little bit. SMB trap receivers, that's how we send out traps. You can send them. The examples I used earlier were MoogSoft and Netcool Omnibus. This is, I don't know, maybe 4th or 5th most used, but we can send out SNMP traps as well. Webhooks, clearly the most popular today. Almost everything has a webhook. I just figured out how to send them to Google Chat last week. There's a bit of a gotcha there. I'll tell you about it here in a little bit. But things like Slack, Teams, PagerDuty, whoever has a webhook, we can send it there. You can also do that same thing from Aria Operations for Logs, by the way. The Slack plugin is out of the box, as well as the ServiceNow notification plugin is out of the box, supporting incidents, but we also have the capabilities to support events and alerts. So those are kind of the outbound notifications. And again, we can take action on any metric, any property, any alert that we see. So left-hand pane of your screen, configure alerts and go to outbound settings, and you will see the plugin types available, right? So if you jump into plugin types, I referenced this earlier, REST plugin has shown deprecated for a few releases now. I just looked at the release upcoming, it's still there. So if you're using REST, great. I would encourage you to explore webhooks. I think they're really, really powerful, potentially more so. And we have a rich kind of template developer around that as well. So once you've created, your plugin type, you just point it at targets, right? So here in my case, I created a webhook for Google Chat. You give it your URL. So that is the actual webhook URL that I created in Google Chat. So I created a Google space, go to applications, I think it is, create webhook, very easy, couple clicks, and configure your webhook notification to point to that URL. There's a few different things that we support here. One is an HTTP proxy on the way out, if need be. And then we support several different credential types, right? So no auth, which is what I'm doing here, but also basic auth, bearer tokens, OAuth authentication, as well as certificates and API keys. So that's gotten a little bit richer over time. So once we have all of the outbound settings configured, right? So those are plugins in my lab. I'll show you here in a little bit. I have, 10 or 12 of them, right? So I have an outbound plugin configured for everywhere that I'm sending information. What we'll do is configure what we call notification rules. So these are top right. If you go to configure and then alerts, notification rules, these are rules that you create to trigger your notification, right? You can create them on every object you want, on certain object types or tags or apps or whatever. You can scope them out to be certain alert types or impact or category or criticality. Criticality is a good one. So for example, maybe you want all critical alerts, going to a webhook, and you want all warnings going to email. This is how you could do that. And in 8.10, 8.12-ish, I can't remember, we added a notification heartbeat. So the notification heartbeat was always available for SMTP, but now it's available for all of the outbound notifications. And what that means is that you will continually get notifications on active alerts, right? So, if CPU is beyond 95 and I'm continually generating alerts until I go down to 94, I will continue to get those notifications beyond just email, which is what it was before. Once you have your notification, you point it at an outbound method. So in this case, notification plugin, and then there are instances available. So maybe you have different spaces, Google Spaces, for example, that you want to send them to, or different Slack channels that you want to send them to. You could have various instances of those webhooks there as well. And then you give it a payload template. I'll get into customization of those here in a little bit, but we do provide some defaults out of the box. And then this is an awesome new feature. I mean, there's something great for me in almost every release. I think this was new in 8.14, and it's the final step of a notification rule config. And what it does is it basically tests the entire process. So it validates the criteria of the notification rule itself. It establishes a connection to the endpoint, confirms any sort of certs or authentication. Then it actually sends a notification, be it an email or a webhook or whatever, and then confirms that it was actually received. So you can see on the right-hand side, the URL webhook I sent it to. I'm using a post method here. Response was test passed successfully. But you also have body and headers there if you need to troubleshoot your template, which I needed to do for Google Chat, by the way. So if you haven't used this, I encourage you to. It's really good because if you're testing webhooks against things like Teams or Google Chat, or potentially some others I haven't tested, the default template fails. So when you go into to configure outbound plugin and click test, it's going to fail every time until you use the JSON payload that's required. And I'll show you how to do that here in a minute. So, we talked about templates. Again, they're all within the configure alerts tab. And here you can see I think there's 6, 7 different default payload templates out of the box: email, log files, SMP traps, etc. But like I said, the default payload templates for webhooks don't work for certain endpoints, right? It's not all the same JSON. So I created a custom template for Google Chat. I just Googled it, went out to Git. Someone had a custom Google Chat template out there that they had tested, downloaded, imported into my lab, worked perfectly. Perfect, right? It's just doing a post, adjusted JSON. And then over on the right-hand side, any of those parameters that you have, you can kind of drag and drop them. So the payload template is really good in terms of, it has a bunch of design capabilities here, right? So I use this to generate, really cool emails as well, because if you're doing any sort of emails, that the default template out of the box it's not great, right? You're going to adjust your emails to look a little bit nicer. So these are some examples, right? So in the background, of course, you can see there that's Slack, and I have a space or a channel set up called Aria Operations Alerts. I'm sending all of my alerts to. In the middle there in white is an email, and I used a custom email template to make it a little bit nicer, right? So the default payload template will give you a lot of fields and a lot of words. So I kind of stanzas that out into alert information, VM properties, VM metrics, and a link to operations. And then finally, on the right-hand side, you can see the Google Chat that I was recently doing. So a couple final things before we jump into my lab here in a little bit. You can also interact with alerts and notifications programmatically, right? And this is important. So if you haven't explored the Operations Suite API, and I encourage you to. So it's just the full operations URL, and at the end of it, rather than /UI, it's /suite-API. It went to a Swagger-based UI, I think 8, maybe 7.5, 8.0 timeframe, which is a game changer, as you know. And you can interact programmatically with alerts, with symptoms, with events, with notifications, however you want, right? Curl, Postman, command line, whatever you're comfortable with. You can also inject events this way via API and /API/events. And a customer that is on this call, we did this together, right? It works perfectly. There's also a large Postman collection out on developer.vmware.com. So I believe it was contributed by John Diaz, who's an old VMware senior staff technical marketing manager. A bunch of contributors to that as well, right? So if you don't know Postman, you don't know all the get, put, post commands, go grab that collection, and you'll be up and running in kind of a few minutes. So I encourage you to look at those. And then finally, there are lots of ways to cancel, to delete, to suspend alerts, but I encourage you to jump into administration and global settings and look at things like symptom and alert expiries, right? You can go, I think, down to maybe 24 hours on those. And what that does is it'll delete any or all canceled alerts after a certain time. Same sort of thing for external event-based active symptoms. So if a symptom has popped based on an external event from, say, vCenter or UCS Manager or something, we can expire those, because those symptoms won't expire on their own, right? The auto expiring symptoms or conditions are generally based on metrics, not events. So I encourage you to look at those, as well as just jump into your environment and run through, cancel and delete old alerts on occasion. I know I do in my lab. So a couple of resources before we get into it. Top one is developer.vmware.com. That's the old VMware code, if you remember it. Lots of samples out there. for operations, for logs, for automation, everything from, I think there's a webhook out there for PagerDuty to, YAML for automation, Supermetrics for operations, everything in between. The VMware by Broadcom Tech Zone is also really good. Apps, well, you see the URL. And then I highlight 3 blogs here. So my blog, and then 2 teammates. One is Dale Hassinger, who's on the call, and one is Cosmin Triff. So they're both active bloggers. They blog about customer use cases, very little to no marketing at all. So explore them, bookmark them. If we run into a problem, we've likely blogged about it, or a cool use case, or a gotcha, or what have you. I know that Cosmin actually just blogged about alerts and notifications because he had a customer ask about it last week. Whereas Dale and I just did a blog together related to a customer use case around Supermetrics. And so bookmark those if you don't have them. And then finally, you can always reach out to your TAMs, your account team, or your Aria specialist to talk about any Aria product, right? Be it alerts and notifications within operations, or logs, or automation, and anything in between. So with that, I'll get out of slides and jump into my lab. Chris, Andy, any questions or comments?
We're going through some of them now, but I think it would be a good time to go into the demo. We'll kind of organize some of these and maybe address them after. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. Let me, okay, where are you? Let me know if you can see my UI.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. So you should see in operations 8.14.1 UI. I am running the latest and greatest. I almost always am. Whenever GA day comes out, I upgrade the next day to find any bugs, any gotchas, what have you. I manage all this with Aria Suite Lifecycle Manager. Very easy to download binaries, apply them, you're up and running in an hour or so. So what I thought we'd start with is just kind of the alerts tab, right? And then I can jump into outbound plugins and notifications and whatnot. But you'll see in the alerts tab, you have alerts, administrative, workbench, and log analyses. So the alerts tab is just that, right? So every alert in your environment, you have the ability to group them differently, right? So say I want to group by time. Clearly, I need to clean some things up here. I have 46,000 alerts from last week. But you also have the ability to do some filtering, right? So maybe if it's just active alerts that you want to see, you can. I have a bunch of inactive alerts here. You can see now I went down to 1,400. But explore the filtering capability at the top, as well as kind of the group by capability here. Oftentimes, I'll just group by criticality, be it within this window or using the alerts widget within a dashboard. And this gives you the kind of the ability to explore just your critical alerts, right? So here's a great example. And if you're familiar with VM Ignite, you know that's Lon Nguyen. I know that he uses my lab. He's probably got a bunch of alerts up and running. So these are alerts against a VM that is using more than 80% of its memory. So you can see when I clicked on the alert, it gives me the object, gives me the alert details, right? So it is based on this condition. The condition also has a little metric chart here, which is awesome. And the ability to jump out and troubleshoot with logs if you want. So all of that is relatively new, but it gives you a little bit of information around the VM itself, around the host. But remember the recommendation and action we spoke about earlier? That's what this is, right? So if I want to adjust the memory on this box or CPU and I have hot add enabled, I can. And I can do it from here, right? So your users can. We can also automate this action in policies, right? So if you go over to configure policies, jump into policy definition, go to your default policy, and jump into alerts and symptoms, you can explore the symptoms, alerts and symptoms that you have and create any sort of automation on those, right? So here's my alert. You can see over here, Is it automated? Is it not automated? Right. So that's how you turn on automation of those actions. But let's jump back here. So again, to highlight the details itself, you just go to the alert details tab, but you can also see any related alerts, right? So have I had any recurrences of this alert in the last 30 days? What do they look like? Which ones are active? Also, we have potential evidence. So if you're familiar with the workbench, you know that the potential evidence here is sort of workbench light, if you will, right? So what it does is it shows various metrics. What this is the dynamic thresholds, the little gray bar there, saying, hey, you might want to look at these metrics that have gone beyond potentially a dynamic threshold and generated event. And then, of course, you always have the ability to jump out to the workbench itself here. Another thing that I really like is the actions drop down, right? So you can cancel, you can suspend, you can assign, you can take ownership, but you can also go to the alert definition itself, right? So if I went to this alert definition, it's based on 5 conditions. So I can edit this if I want, I can clone it, I can delete it, I can do whatever I might want. So in this case, we're affecting the health badge. It's based on the symptom. Our wait cycles are 1 and 1. And I just jump over here to see, hey, what are they? What are the conditions that I'm actually looking at to generate this alert? Here's my recommendation, which I know has that, that action assigned to it. And then I add it into the policies. So if you're not familiar with troubleshoot and alerts, jump in here, play around, see what actions you can take and which ones you don't necessarily need to. Administrative alerts. Administrative alerts are just that. They're alerts against things like adapter instances not collecting data, data not collecting, adapter certificates expiring, what have you. And we can create notifications on any of these as well, right? So those are really, really important. Let's jump into configure and alerts and explore some of my definitions. So here's my alert definitions. Get rid of the filter there. If I want to just add any sort of definition, I'll just give it a base object type. Now, if I want to say, wait for 3 cycles before I make it generate an alert and make a notification, I can do that here, right? So this is how I would do that related to the question earlier. And then if I want a condition, say I just want, I don't know, whatever, I'll just grab whatever metric. I give it a condition, say if I'm beyond 99%, generate a critical. Okay, moving on. If I want a recommendation, I can create one. I can use one of those out of the box, right? So here are all sorts of different recommendations, some that we've added, some that we've added with actions, what have you. Just drag it over to the right. And then I activate it in the policy and I'm off and running. So alerts themselves are pretty easy, as are symptoms, right? So like I said, symptoms are really a global construct and they can be metric or property-based symptoms. So CPU or OS levels or VM tools versions, what have you. But they can also be message events. And these are important. So message events are symptoms that are based on a message or a log that's come in from something like vCenter or UCSM or Unisphere, or, you can see kind of my sources here, and we can create symptoms based on those as well. So I would also encourage you to explore those. Now, the outbound settings, you can see all of mine here, right? So this is the one I was working most recently on, but I also have a trap notification, ServiceNow, Slack, webhook, etc. So if you jump in and you go, you'll notice you give it your URL, you give it some credentials. And remember I said earlier, when you tested these, you'll get a failure. And this is kind of a gotcha, at least on when it comes to Google Chat webhooks, as well as Teams webhooks, in that it uses the default payload template on that test. That default payload template is JSON that, in this case, Google Chat and Teams won't receive, or it'll reject. So how do I deal with that? Well, you create a payload template that works. So these are, like I said, this Google Chat payload template, if you Google it right now, you'll find it out on GitHub. So what I did was I downloaded it from GitHub, I imported it, And here it is, right? So it's just running a post. You can see the template itself. So if I wanted to adjust that, just go into edit, give it some outbound methods, give it some content, additional content if you wish. But here's where kind of most of the information is, right? So do I want to use JSON? Do I want to use XML? Do I want any custom headers? Do I want to use put or post? And then the payload itself is here, right? And you can see all of the available parameters are here. So maybe for example, I don't know, I'm just going to grab some random one here. Maybe for example, I wanted alert ID and I wanted it to come at the end of that stanza, copy and paste, right? And then you update that template. And then when you actually go to make the notification, let's jump in and do one of those here. Go to notifications. Oh, where are you? Google Chat notifications, edit. You can see I'm using the webhook notification plugin in my new Google Chat. And I initiate that process. It's going to ask me for some sort of box. Oops. What do I want there? Oh, I think I'm using the wrong one. Google Chat template, where are you? So I'll go next, define a criteria, outbound plugin, Google Chat. I think I need a name here. Virtual machine. Add CPU next. Find one of my names next. Oh, that rule is deactivated. No wonder. So if that notification rule is activated, this will work. Activate the rule, which is another really cool thing, by the way, about notification rules. You can turn them off and you can turn them on kind of ad hoc, and you can do that programmatically as well. So let's try that again. And no alert definition selected for this rule, which is fine. So you'll have to trust me on this one. The Google Chat and any sort of initiation process that you start here will work if you have the correct template. So I think Chris, we're close to the top here. I have like 10:58 on my watch.
Yeah, we have the webinar scheduled till 11:30, but if if there's not a lot more content, we can definitely take some time to answer some lingering questions if you want. Your call.
Yeah, why don't we do that? Why don't we take some time to answer questions or comments? If anyone has their hand up, we could take them off mute and they could ask whatever you like.
Yeah. So one question here, I think that you may have touched on this just now, but I think it's kind of good to call out. I think it's a good question where it says, are we able to bundle alerts where we could essentially, just have one alert kind of getting the same things across different ones? And I think that maybe means one notification. And you had that granular sort of, it wasn't a radio button, but the toggle right there. So that might have something to do with it, but definitely wanted to touch on that.
Yep. Yeah, you can. And by the way, I got it to work here, as you can see. And this is actually, so it had to be configured against a VM and it had to have a certain alert notified, but you'll notice that it's using the old template, which is why it fails, right? So it's really important to go through this initiation process because it'll catch kind of a bunch of gotchas along the way. But so to your question, can we kind of combine or bundle alerts? And the answer is yes, and we'll do it a few different ways. Generally, you'll do it via, either a symptom or a condition. And what I mean by that is let's just do one. So we'll go say vCenter, VM. And now I'm just going to look for some random symptoms. So what we can say is, if this symptom is true, and this symptom is true, generate the alert, right? So up top on the drop down where it says alert is triggered when any or all of these are true, you'll want to explore that. So, that's our and or our or operator, and that's our and operator. So in this case, this alert would trigger when CPU is greater than 98% for 60 minutes. And this symptom is at a critical level, right? So generally how you'll do it is at the kind of the symptom layer as opposed to the alert layer itself. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. If not, definitely feel free to post the question again and we'll try to be a little bit more specific.
Yeah, if the question was on, say, notifications on the same alert, what you could do is something like this. So here, for example, I have an email notification with my SMTP outbound plugin set for all critical alerts to be sent out to me via email. So what I did, you can see, I just gave it kind of a generic name. And then in the alert scope, I just scope on criticality, right? So say, for example, you wanted immediates or warnings or criticals, you could do that and you could set those up to go someplace else. Or maybe you wanted, just certain definitions to go out. So I'm going to just grab, I don't know, some sort of test, say here. So now this notification will only run on alerts based on that definition. So I think the question was really, can I send out emails or webhooks or what have you based on certain scopes? And the answer is yes, you can. And this is where you do it.
Nice. Okay, speaking of webhooks, there was one question in here about a use case where whether or not ops can receive SNMP webhooks from other systems.
Not that I know of.
Yep, okay.
So Dale Cosman, come off mute if you know that it can, but I don't think so. The way you want to inject events into operations is via the API events endpoint. So let me just show you. So remember we spoke about the Suite API, and if you're not familiar with it, you should be. So you can see the URL I went to, right? So I just got rid of the /UI and went to /Suite API. So, you can do local auth, what have you. And you'll see that we have hundreds and hundreds of endpoints here, right? But here's our API endpoints. And if you want to push a single event into the system, you can see that you basically just do a post API /events. And what you'll do is you'll give it an event type. You'll give it a resource ID. So say, for example, you want to push an event against a VM or what have you. Well, that VM has a resource ID. So you put that resource in here, give it a start time, and then your message is really the payload, right? And then, of course, you can do severity. And you can always try these out here, right? So, give it your event type, give it your resource ID, and then you can execute it. And it'll run off and do that execution, right? So you can see the curl command it's running, just doing a post. And you can see where your gotchas are, right? So, your resource ID, of course, will change. Maybe you want a different event type. Maybe you want some sort of different message here and a different severity. But I don't know that we can receive traps, but we can definitely receive events. So if you're trying to inject them, this is how I would do it.
Great. Thanks. Let's do one more question, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. Unless you have something else that you wanted to demo, Brock. Want to make sure.
Nope. No. All good.
Okay. So earlier you showed like an SMTP payload, and there's a question about whether or not it could be in a GitHub repo, something public.
Yeah. Yeah, it could. So let's just jump in. We'll go to payload templates.
They want a copy of it more specifically.
Oh, okay.
Oh, they want a copy of mine. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, no problem. I can do that. So, but it's a great place to host stuff, right? Like, I mean, I was banging my head on the desk because of the Google Chat template, and I was digging through the documentation, and I couldn't get the JSON to work, but I found it on GitHub, right? Because someone shared it there. So that's why I love to share. I share everything that I have on my blog, everything that I have on GitHub, everything I have on VMware Code, because the more you know, right? The more you know, the more everybody knows. So the default templates are, they're not great, right? So, I mean, here's the default template. You can see the subject line, you can see kind of the body of it. It gets pretty kind of messy pretty quick, right? So I just cloned on that and I riffed it and I went like this and I said, give it my standard email plugin. I want to add some additional VM metrics and properties, which you can tell it about in step 2. And then in step 3, I give it all kind of, the cool formatting, right? So forgive the dark background here, but I've formatted my body to be kind of stanza'd, right? So here's my alert information, when it was created, the object name, the object type, etc. And then this is just for VMs, obviously. But then I have a bunch of VM data and metadata as well, right? It's really interesting. And then some VM metrics down below. Of course, any of the parameters over on the right-hand side, you can use for that. So for whoever wanted it, there's an export. So now I have a payload template JSON. So I'll post that JSON, or whoever asked for it, just reach out to me, brock.peterson@broadcom.com. And once you get it, you go here and import. You're off and running. And I'm happy to share any of these as well. The Google Chat template, the Teams adaptive card notification, which is a really cool way to do Teams, as well as the Teams template as well. So,
yeah, great, awesome.
But-
So, yeah, go ahead, Brock. Sorry.
And yeah, other questions or comments or anything?
Yeah, I think that I would just encourage everyone to reach out to your TAM for any questions that didn't get addressed. A lot of them were answered here. And Dale, really appreciate you doing that. And Brock,
Yeah,
of course. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say thank you, Dale. I asked Dale to join. It's tough to do both, and then ask questions too. So
Yeah, for sure. And of course, this was really good content today. You could see from all the questions and who joined. So really appreciate you taking the time to go over all of this. This is really awesome content.
yeah, for sure. Thanks for joining. Hopefully it was beneficial. If we didn't get to the questions, which almost always happens, please reach out, right? I'm happy to answer any of them. I'm happy to jump on a call with your Aria specialist or your TAM or whomever, right? Operations is super, super powerful. It's on the marquee. And alerts and notifications is a very powerful feature within.
Yep, I appreciate that, Brock. Yeah, so with that, I say we just go ahead and wrap up here. We mentioned at the beginning that this was recorded. Your TAM will make that available to you. And of course, any of the resources we discussed here, sharing some of the things that, Brock has in his lab environment, we can make those, connections for you and make that available to you as well. Again, please join us next month. We'll be looking at VCF and, all the automation and orchestration and how you can deploy it, as a production grade infrastructure. That will be on March the 14th. Your TAM will send that to you and give you all the registration information. So appreciate everyone joining. Have a good rest of the day. Thank you again.